Okay, so welcome to PSC 501, September 6, 2023. And our guest tonight is Isabel Skinner. Literally. Tell us something about your early upbringing. Where were you born? What was life like there, etc.?
Hello, it's great to meet you all. I am originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was born and raised there. Charlotte's a great place. It is a large city, very progressive in some ways in the South. I think people outside of the South, and especially outside of the city, don't really know about it or have a very weird sort of impression of it from like Ricky Bobby or something, But it's a very interesting place. It is important in terms of Southern politics and organizing. And we're in touch with, I guess, history there. I could say more, but I don't want to go on and on, I guess.
All right. And I just thought of one other thing. But help me remember later, if there's anybody who was not on the Zoom last week and would like to introduce yourselves, let's do that in between Isabel's interview and the presentation, because I think there's some new names. In any case, though, let's continue with this. All right, tell us something about the politics, society, and culture of this place. You sort of alluded to this a bit, but
politically, Charlotte is one of those places where within the metropolitan area, it would be considered pretty liberal in terms of voting behavior, but within a state that has been largely conservative. If you're familiar with presidential politics, you'll know that on the campaign level, both campaigns have been convinced for many years that North Carolina is purple, and so therefore either flippable or in danger. And it has been in some ways tight, in some ways not so tight. North Carolina is also the subject of many Supreme Court decisions regarding voting restrictions. That is not an accident. But living there on the ground, people are very friendly. Very warm in the South. It's different than my experience here so far in the Midwest, but definitely more friendly than other places, even within kind of more urban areas. Charlotte's very diverse, and it is like historically a place where integration was really key. One of the first places to do busing integration. I went to a high school that is larger than UIS, was 5,000 students, and it was very diverse. And as a kid, I really was convinced that the population looked very different than the US population actually does, because I was exposed to a lot more diversity than I think maybe other folks are in general. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, it was a great place to grow up. It's a very green city in terms of there's so many beautiful trees, which is something that I really like about parts of Springfield. The fields obviously are gorgeous, but also like the Washington Park area is really pretty. So yeah.
all right. When did you know that political science was the path for you? And who was most impactful in your decision to pursue graduate school?
So at my large public high school, I joined the debate team. I was not a big sports person. I tried, but I was not a very successful sports person. So debate team made sense for me. And like a lot of people, it became kind of my team, my group of people. That was also a very diverse club on campus, and so got to meet all different kinds of people, like literally from all over the world, but also from different parts of Charlotte. And we were a very successful team. We kind of had this like clout when we would go around North Carolina, and so it was cool to be part of that. And so I knew before college that I was for sure going to do political science. And sure enough, I like immediately declared I had 0 second, no looking back, no regrets. And my undergraduate advisor, John Creed, who has retired now, but he was super beloved for his advising in particular. He had like that office where like that's like floor to ceiling books like all around in this like slanted old building in Charleston, in the College of Charleston. And I graduated from the College of Charleston in political science departmental honors. But anyway, I found like really kind of my group of people in that department too. And so Dr. Creed and some of his colleagues who were also really pushed me to go for some of the more intense awards and rules as an undergraduate. They made me feel like I could do it. I could do grad school. And so I really had the idea before I left undergrad that was something that would be in my future eventually. But I also took Dr. Creed's advice and I took a little bit of a gap before I began that journey. So.
All right. So just for the sake of thoroughness, could you say where you went to undergraduate and graduate school?
Yeah, I went to the College of Charleston for undergraduate. That is a public liberal arts school in Charleston, South Carolina. It fights with UNC as whether or not it's the oldest campus in the United States. It was founded in 1770, so before the US, and it is a very funky place. Lots of historic buildings, very diverse, eclectic faculty who I think they're just inspired to come live in that place. I would say pretty progressive faculty in South Carolina, which is, not necessarily the most progressive place. But Charleston, again, like Charlotte, is sort of like has this bubble effect. But I've also lived other places that were kind of like not right. Anyway, I went to University of Arizona, which is very kind of opposite in a lot of ways to other experiences, because that is a huge school. But as a graduate student, I was not, going to football games. I'm sorry, I never went to a single football game. I didn't really participate as much in maybe the brand that University of Arizona is. It's a giant campus. It's one of the largest undergraduate campuses in the US. But I did get some of the cool aspects of being a part of that community. Tucson is a great place. Arizona is a Hispanic serving institution, so the student body population is different than a lot of large undergraduate campuses. There's also a much higher proportion of indigenous students than other places because the campus is built directly on top of indigenous land. Arizona, go Arizona, bear down.
All right. Please describe some of the courses you teach, and obviously especially the graduate ones, so your 400s and 500s.
Yeah, so I teach a couple of combo classes that include elements for undergraduate and graduate students. And I really appreciate that because graduate students are sort of like my colleagues in helping to break things down for undergraduate students. I push you all a little bit further, and then I have kind of a separate track in some of the expectations for you all in those classes. Some of you might be familiar with that. And so, for example, right now I'm teaching an ECHE class, African Americans in American Politics. And even though that's an ECHE class, there are advanced themes and readings. So that is available to master's level students. I have also taught that course in the past as a race and ethnicity politics class. And I'm thinking about pushing that even further to be a higher level course. But I also, right now I'm teaching ECHE Women in Politics, and that is also kind of has 2 tracks. And I teach that more as like a gender exploration and public policy disparities type of class. And in both of those courses, I'm really interested in The idea that even though race and gender are social constructions, they impact people's everyday lives and political realities. And so you may have heard some folks say that there aren't any disparities out there, but we're going to show the disparities that exist through evidence. I'm talking mountains of evidence, okay? And then we'll break that down over many different public policy areas of interest. I have a bit of a different methodology for my US-Mexico border politics course, but I really love this course. I've been working on this since my Arizona days, kind of building out this course. And this is broken down a little bit differently, where we really focus on the history, because I think that that's overlooked in K-12 education in most of the US. But then we also talk about the creation of borders, and then go into more specific issues related to the US-Mexico border. But my expertise, as you'll learn, is in immigration. And so I wanted to make a course that was appropriate for people who have less of a background in this, but also for higher level students, including master's students who want to take all of their learning and put it into this important, I think important topic in American politics.
All right, how would you describe your teaching style and teaching philosophy?
So my style, I think, is a combination of me wanting to be sort of serious, but then getting really nerded out and excited about everything. And so hopefully that energy is contagious when I can tap into it. So I think that that's kind of my style, is like hoping that my enthusiasm and nerdiness rubs off on others. Also, in terms of what I want people to gain and sort of like the philosophy, this sounds really like terminology, like jargony, but and I don't want to be cliche, but it is true that critical thinking is like what I want people to take away. It doesn't have to be something I'm interested in, but you should be able to apply advanced types of theory to all kinds of issues. Also, I think it's really important to be able in your everyday lives, no matter what you're interested in, to find quality sources. Unfortunately, I think we have a crisis of people who do not understand how to find quality sources to inform themselves. But that's what we expect for our master's students in our program, and for our undergraduate students, but definitely for our master's students. So that's something that you can learn how to do for yourselves, but then also help equip other people with getting the best types of information and being able to, I guess, not necessarily debate, because I don't want to frame things that way, but just make sure that you understand evidence and how to present it authentically, rather than perhaps misconstrue it intentionally or unintentionally. So
Those are great points. Other than the subject matter, what do you want your students to leave your classroom with? Is there anything other than the topics covered which you want them to internalize?
Again, I think kind of like a feeling like a self equipping yourself and having self-confidence that you're able to tackle tough questions through research, but also you're able to have difficult conversations. There, something is bouncing off of my window. Who knows? Squirrels throwing things at me, I guess. Apologies. So I think, you know, a lot of times we hear that, okay. Just one second. I will be right back. I'm so sorry.
All right. So actually, I wanted to, it was not a bad time for her to have to go fight that bat or snake or whatever she's going to fight outside her house now. But because I wanted to say that she's hitting on some of the things that are also a big part of the graduate program, that kind of doing research and representing it accurately. So, a lot of people, we have a hard time with this, I think, particularly in political science, because people are unused to people talking about politics without an axe to grind. So one of the things that we really emphasize when we're doing lit reviews is we don't want to even though there definitely are sides and camps and factions and whatnot within scholarly literatures, we don't want to caricature each other. When we're writing a lit review, we always want somebody to be able to recognize themselves and what we say about them, which is a little different. So what'd you kill out there, Isabel?
So that was my spouse creatively telling me that they were let down. So that's really, it worked. So there you go.
So you didn't actually have to fight it.
No, didn't have to fight anything today, so that's good. I was like, I knew that these animals were intelligent, but that's just really next level. But no, that was really good aim. But anyway, yeah, I definitely appreciate what you're saying, John. That's definitely part of my philosophy too. Obviously, I teach courses about race and gender, which are hot topics, sometimes mysteriously to me. However, I also teach courses in American politics. I teach in a political science oriented department. And so first, students need to know that it's literally okay to talk about politics. It's not rude to talk about politics if you're a student, a master's student in political science. But also, it's possible to have respectful conversations about race when it comes to scholarship as well, in interpersonal, but also in terms of discussing scholarship. Gender, these things are complex, but you can handle it. You just have to do so with a lot of humility. You just have to have a lot of humility when you go into conversations, and expect to learn something. I just heard a quote from somewhere, so I don't want to misquote it, but it was basically, in essence, keep an open mind, expect to leave some room to have something new enter, don't just go in with whatever you're going to say next. And that's how learning is really different from debate. Like, debate got me interested in current events. It got me interested in public speaking, but that's not what we're doing here. We are not in debate. Okay. We're in graduate level education. And so that's a very different environment.
All right. So please tell us something about your scholarly interests. So your more research side.
Yeah, so my research is mostly about public opinion and behavior, but specifically in the world of immigration, because that's a huge topic. But I'm also interested in the more political, psychological elements of that. So like attitude formation. I'm especially passionate about understanding stereotypes, their origins and their power over people, and their decision making. And that's particularly fascinating to me. So there are many different types of migrant populations that are of interest to me, many different types of communication that are of interest. So I feel like it is both a very fruitful area where there's just so many things to work on, but there are actually surprisingly not as many scholars focusing on immigration within the field of political science as I originally expected coming into it as a graduate student. And particularly focusing on refugees is something that I did not recognize as being understudied until I started studying it myself. So that's really fascinating.
Well, that leads right into the next question. Is why do you think it's important to study what you study?
Well, I think that, obviously we have a lot of attention and concern about immigrants and refugees and immigration in the political realm. But also there's this sort of like imbalance where we talk a lot about these folks, we don't talk to them as much. So that's one of the imbalances, but also there's a paucity, there's just like a gap in terms of describing attitudes towards refugees. There's been some excellent work, so I don't want to undermine that, but you would think that there would be more, considering how this population kind of is the epitome of a humanitarian group or a humanitarian interest. And even though immigrants as a whole are not maybe the substantial group, but also refugees might be a smaller group, around 1% of the US population. That's everyone who has ever arrived as a refugee. That's still valuable. And I think it's really important to care about smaller populations, especially when they're under so much pressure. Like the pressure that they receive is extreme, considering that their political power to oppose that is limited for just so many different reasons. So that's kind of one of my things, is like picking a group which is in the news, is important, but is also not able to wage maybe political power back. So that's something that's interesting to me.
Okay. What are the contributions to scholarship and or to policy of your work?
So in terms of scholarship, I try to look for puzzles and paradoxes. There are so many puzzles and paradoxes within immigration. Hopefully my presentation, I'll elucidate a few of those for you that I have worked on. But in terms of public policy, again, these are policies that Americans feel are very important. It's ranked as a high ranking issue in terms of importance. But also tracking attitudes is really interesting, because even though people say they care, what they're responding to is often based on symbolism and really kind of like one-dimensional things like stereotypes, but also very fast, very small cues. And so they're not necessarily reacting to factual changes, they're reacting to emotions and other types of cues that we process faster as humans. So I think that that's really interesting too.
So what specific topics are you working on right now? So what are your research, what are you writing about nowadays?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on a project with Dr. Transu that's in the like, you know, data analysis phase. And we're looking at classic questions about political tolerance and providing some updates potentially, hopefully, to those questions and the way we access them through measurement and survey research, which is super important. And even though I haven't worked on this type of project directly before, it's really great to do that with somebody who knows about this topic and is, you know, like really a valuable contributor to this topic. But also it's important to me as somebody who studies, again, kind of populations that are under pressure, who may face the impacts of intolerance, right? But also I'm interested in how the general public creates attitudes towards those groups. I'm also working on a project that's under review right now, and that is a cross-national survey of the US, Canada, and Australia, looking at some cues towards refugees. And I'll talk about that briefly in my presentation.
All right. If students share your interests, what classes would you recommend they take?
If you're interested in immigration, you should take my US-Mexico border politics class and take the master's level road on that. And I know that in sociology, Maria Duenas has a new course, but also you should definitely take some of the international and global studies courses with Dr. Crocker. You should take public opinion with Dr. Shansu. Is that a master's level course? Actually, yeah, you should definitely take that for sure. And yeah, I think that also, even though I'm not as trained in political philosophy, for example, all of these things can kind of work together because they teach you critical approaches, which is really important. And so if you take a class with me, we're reading sociology, we're reading philosophy, we're reading cutting edge, like, experimental research. We're reading a variety of things that get us to the place we want to go. So yeah, don't live in your little tiny box. Do something weird.
So, one of the purposes of this course is to get people thinking about and get them ready for their closure project. So what would an MA exam or thesis look like under your supervision?
Yeah, so one of the things that my undergraduate advisor, to some extent my graduate advisors also, but especially my beloved undergraduate advisor, John Creed, taught me was how to creed, which is like read really fast. So we'll talk about how to read, how to gain traction on something that feels massive, like reading 70, 80 pieces of literature, and make sure you have the tools to basically teach me. So I'm not going to read everything in your area, but you're going to become the expert, and then you're going to teach me, and I will basically let you know if you are teaching me or not. You know what I mean? So I will let you know what I'm getting, and that's sort of the purpose of like an exam. In terms of a project, we got to move fast, like really fast, but you can do it because I also teach the undergraduate version of their final projects. And I'm really a nerd about like the research process. So I've got all of that. I can give you pep talks about how to get there. But, it's going to be fast and also a bumpy road to do these projects, but just be okay with being a little bit uncomfortable, because at the end, someone will ask you about your topic and you'll just be able to just go on and on like I'm doing right now. So there you go.
All right, final question. Recalling your experiences as a graduate student, what advice would you give to our MA students, to these MA students?
I think again, learn how to read fast. I'm not talking about every word. I'm talking about like a strategy. Read the beginning and the end, and then the middle, and come up with something that helps you rip everything out like fast. Also, be super organized, like whatever works for you, not somebody else, but like for you. I use a paper agenda, and I'm not kidding that if it's not in my paper agenda, like it won't happen. And that's just how I just need that. And so I have Outlook, I have everything, but like that helps me. I also have an ideas notebook that like helps me like I just like doing a weird thing, but like yeah, it's not a special notebook, but it has all of my ideas and all of my meetings, and so it is really helpful. Like I don't know how your brain works, but for my brain, I don't just remember every single thing verbatim. So if I'm having a meeting, I have the last meeting like open, so I can be like, yeah, you said this, and it's really nice. Or like, write everyone's name down, something like that. And so that's really good. Also, if you always have something for when you have an idea, because I'm the kind of person that if I have an idea, I just write it down immediately so it won't go away. Bye-bye. And so work with yourself. Don't work against yourself. Like, don't do something just because somebody else said that's their pattern. Like, if your pattern is to work really hard for 4 hours and then take a nap, then do that. Like, don't burn yourself out doing somebody else's thing. I definitely struggled with that my first couple of years of PhD program, where I thought I could just work 100% of the time, and I felt like literally guilty going to the grocery store, which sounds so crazy now, but I've had a lot of therapies. Okay, but you really need to do your way, not somebody else's way, because at the end of the day, I was still more productive when I did it my way, right? Like, I still had the goods to show. So don't tell me like, oh, you didn't work 80 hours a week. So, but anyway, sorry, that turned into kind of a rant. But basically, don't fight yourself. Figure out what's going to work for you, and then just stay super organized. And then once you have a routine, for most people at least, that can be really helpful. But also creatively kind of break your routine too. Like, be open for that. That was a lot of like, I feel like I turned into therapy right there. But yeah.
That was great advice. But yes, I remember the guilt about, I went to graduate school at the University of Minnesota, and my grad office was on the 12th floor. And people said that one of the elevators would sometimes freeze, so I never got on the elevator without a book. I was like, what if the elevator freezes and I'm in here for 4 hours while then I got to be able to do some work. So
Yeah.
just a small scale. All right. Well, thank you very much. And that advice was super helpful. And what you've been saying about how to read is one of the things that we are going to do a lot. We have readings about reading, and
Great.
we're going to do a lot of practical work on that in this class.